Okay, this is the December 20th meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. It is 7:04 and we will start with a call to order. 7:04. The next item is to review the agenda for any additional removals or adjustments. I have nothing. Is there any other suggestions? Okay, we'll follow along the agenda. Item 2 is continuing business with grant work with Addison County Regional Planning, and Adam's here to lead us with that one.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Let's see. So the first thing that Kevin asked me to do for tonight was kind of to give you an overview, or to go back and kind of give you a little roadmap of where we've been and where we're going and why we've done what we've done. So let's see, Chris, I gave you one of the documents I gave you was I think it was called
Preliminary List of Bristol Development.
Yes, that is it. If you would pull up the first page of that, that would be great.
There it is.
So as you all recall, basically Bristol got a grant from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And in order to aid the development of more housing of more types within Bristol, and specifically within Bristol's village area, or what I would call basically your land use planning area, your village land use planning area, we'll investigate issues within your development regulations. So we're going to see what changes, what tweaks we can make to your development regulations that would make it easier to develop housing and all types of housing. So let's see. Basically, some of the things like your definitions go all across basically Bristol's regs. So we will look at some definitional things, and then we were also going to look at basically the density of the zones within the village planning area, and specifically your village, your high density, excuse me, let's see, where do I have that written down somewhere? Here. Your village business district, your residential office commercial district, your village mixed district, your high density residential district, and your village residential district. So sorry, I couldn't pull those right off the top of my head. What we've done thus far is basically we did a little bit of learning about the roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission. We did a little bit about, I guess my camera's there. We did a little bit about the owl. We did a little bit about the demographics and the changing demographics and what type of housing you might like to create. So as you all recall, basically house sizes are shrinking. A lot of the demographics within the village of Bristol, a lot of your rentals, or 62% of your households are 1 to 2 people. 35% of your head of households are over 62. Of rental households, 72% have 1 to 2 people in them. 96% have 3 or less. That's your rental housing. So demographics have changed. The types of housing that you need have also changed, I would argue, with that, and some of those statistics go to that. So what changes are we going to make to your regulations to deal with, to address that? So we're going to look at density in all of your zoning districts within the village planning area. We're going to look at your dimensional standards. And Chris, this might be a good time to pull up the maps that I sent you.
Maps. Is that part of the dimensional standards document?
It's not. It's maps.
Oh, I missed it. That's all right.
It's a big, oh, maybe you couldn't open it. It's a big file. It's like
Okay.
25 megawatts or megabytes.
I only got the two that I see.
Okay. Is there something
Oh,
there's
full map.
full map set?
Let's go change my sharing. I need access to this. Google Drive.
Good question.
I already sent it to you.
Oh, you know what?
Internet access.
We're not gonna go there.
What, do you just need a village planning map PDF?
You can just pull it up. I've got other stuff, but we're not gonna get into it tonight. So yes, just a village map will be fine.
Stop sharing.
There we go. So,
Sorry. Oop, going as fast as I can.
no, you're doing great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
So as you recall, this is your land use planning area, your village land use planning area. The HDR is the dark blue. That's most of your existing village. The village residential is the lighter blue, kind of on the outskirts of your village. The village mixed is the crosshatched. So it's in a couple of different places within the village and then down in Rockydale. The ROC is the gold, basically along West Street. And then your village business district is the purple, I'll call it purple, dark red, that Chris is showing you. So those are largely the places where we're going to look at dimensional standards. Your dimensional standards are things like setbacks, front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, acreage requirements, density requirements, things of that nature. Do your regs actually reflect your existing settlement patterns? And we're going to look at places within them, and then maybe we'll make some modifications to those dimensional standards to make it easier for people to basically redevelop their parcels, change their building footprints, things of that nature. Do you have a question, Fred? No, excuse me. Other things beyond that, allowable housing types. So we want to talk, and this is where we went last meeting. We talked about ADUs a little bit. We talked about multifamily dwelling units a little bit, and we talked about duplexes a little bit. And honestly, I started there because these apply across the town, and I had hoped that making some definitional changes would be the easiest part of the process, and we could get off on a strong footing. It proved to be a little more difficult than I suspected. But that's all right. You asked me to do some homework, and I'm back with that homework tonight. So that's where we'll restart tonight. Accessory dwelling unit. And then basically the review process, which people go through. So it's either site plan review permitted, which goes to the zoning administrator, site plan review, which is a limited set of criteria, and then conditional use review, which is basically it says, it asks some broader general questions. Is this development appropriate in this area is kind of how I would summarize them. And then if you get beyond those general questions, it also includes site plan. So it's a little harder level of review. It's a two-phase level of review. And then we will look at elements of site plans that's required. And then we'll look at some other things, parking, PDUs, we'll look at your subdivision requirements, and then we'll look at other things that you may all suggest that we think this would help you. We think this change to our definitional regulation would help us improve housing within Bristol. So that's basically my game plan for getting through this whole project with all of you. So I'm back to allowable housing types, ADUs, multifamilies, duplexes that I want to do tonight.
If I could interrupt a little bit, does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Where we're going or the path we're going on? So I guess nobody else is saying, so one thing I'm kind of worrying about is how do we get from discussion to revising zoning, which is actually the end plan? Is that something that starts along, we have some discussion first and then we start looking at what exactly we're going to modify in the verbiage afterwards? Is that what the plan is?
Yes. Yep. So for example, we're going to start with your accessory dwelling unit language tonight. We'll basically look at the state statute and the changes to the state statute. We'll look at your existing regulations. We'll basically have some discussion, decide whether you want to make any changes to your regulations. And honestly, there aren't a lot to be made to improve housing. Yours are already pretty liberal. So there may not be a lot there, but we'll look at it. We'll have a discussion. We'll decide what changes we want to make, and then I would incorporate those changes as a draft changes to your zoning regulations. Same with multifamily, same with duplexes. When we get to dimensional standards, Chris, I had up on the screen earlier, basically a chart of all your dimensional standards. We'll start looking at them and in comparison to what exists on the ground and decide whether or not 75 feet is an appropriate setback.
Well, my question, and built on what Kevin was saying, is do we have a rubric for assessing each of these? In other words, rather than just, what do you feel about this? Is, you know, it seems to me that I was thinking about this a little bit, that say, okay, here's a possible change. Okay, how do we assess what we think of that change? And to me, one way, and this is again off the top of my head, I'm gonna say, okay, if we made this change, what would be the effects? What would be the positive effects? What would be the negative effects? How do they balance? And then you have a. I'm trying to think of a way to systematize.
Yeah.
You know, so you're not just bouncing from one idea to another and saying, well, that sounds like a good idea.
Sure.
And that's not a criticism of you in any way, right? Okay. Because I meant to start by saying you're doing an incredible amount of work here, and I really appreciate it.
No, I'm thank you, and I'm not worried about it. The answer is the purpose of the grant, basically the premise behind why Bristol sought the grant. So what changes should we make to our regulations that will improve our ability to create the type of housing that we want in Bristol? Is kind of what I would call our matrix. Does this improve our ability to create the type of housing that we want in Bristol? It assumes that we all want the same type of housing, which may or may not be true. But really that's, to a certain extent, the matrix that you're looking for. With dimensions, it's a little bit easier. So I'm gonna show Jeff something that maybe you all can't see. I'll hold it up to the camera. These are the maps. We're not going to get into them tonight, but I did bring them as an example. This one happens to show your ROC district. So, and basically the orange and the red show lots within the ROC district that do not meet your current regulations. So, for example, if some of them don't meet frontage regulations, some of them don't meet acreage regulations. You know, your zoning was developed a long time after the village of Bristol had been in existence. And For the most part, it's pretty good, but there are places where there are some existing lots, pre-existing lots, that don't meet the standards. I would say for when we're looking at those specific standards, it would be, well, does this reflect what we want, what exists in the village of Bristol? Or do we change it to accommodate more of what already exists? Does that make some sense?
Mhm.
Okay, so for matrices or for the dimensional standards, that's how we'll do it. For the densities, we can do it that way a little bit, and then you all can decide whether or not you want to increase densities or not. I will tell you, your densities are relatively well aligned with what you have that exists within the village. But if you adopt the premise that we want to expand housing in the village, then you may want to increase density within certain places in the village so you could expand housing. Okay?
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on where we're going? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, when John's going.
Yeah, and Adam, thanks. You had mentioned early on, you were looking specifically in the village planning area. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, so one of the kind of underlying goals of the Vermont statutes, basically that deal with land use planning, is that they are trying to create villages surrounded by rural countryside. So relatively dense populated villages surrounded by rural countryside. And I would say to a certain extent, Bristol has that right now. If you choose to grow housing, you also have a basically zero rental vacancy rate right now. And we talked a little bit about that in the demographic analysis we did a couple of meetings ago. If you believe you want to increase supply to change that that very low vacancy rate, then statute would suggest that the village is the place to do that.
Right. I'm glad we're going to really focus on that because to me, the village planning area, is really important. It was put in place to be, the focus of housing development for village expansion, basically. And I'm afraid that we've already seen a little bit of a degradation in one area of the village planning area where something a heavier use is going to be there and might impinge on future housing use. But so I'm interested in the subject of sort of protecting the village planning area generally, and so we'll be sort of touching that as we go through all this, right?
So we're going to look almost exclusively at the village planning area. I mean, the grant basically was for the village planning area. So that's kind of our scope of work. It's focused largely on what changes can we make to our unified development regulations that will improve our ability to permit the types of housing that we want within the village planning area. So it's largely focused on creating more housing. If there are other things the Planning Commission wants to change while we're in here, we can look at those, but I don't want to get too far off scope, if that makes sense.
I guess I'm just thinking about uses within the, there's a lot of zones within the village planning area, and at some point in this process, I'm not saying right here, but at some point I'd love to look at uses, permitted and conditional uses and prohibited uses for the zones. And is that something that would be under the umbrella of this overall process?
Only with respect to housing is what I would say. It's largely a housing study for not housing uses, not necessarily commercial uses. So.
Right.
You, the planning commission, could choose to expand it a little bit, but it's outside of scope and probably outside of budget.
Right. All right. Well, I just want to make sure that the uses that we permit in the village planning area are consistent with housing as the emphasis. And I think a change made in 2020 in the town regs has already undermined the village planning area in one place where there's now going to be a heavy truck maintenance yard in the village planning area and not a compatible use. So that was only opened up because of a change in the uses that were allowed. The change came in 2020, I think. So I don't know when we might look at some uses, make sure that the uses are consistent with housing.
Yeah, so let's get back to Adam's presentation. We're getting off topic.
Okay, so back to housing, back to specifically your definitions. Chris, if I could ask you to bring us back to the preliminary list of Bristol's development regs.
This document,
Nope.
Word doc.
The Word doc. There you go. Next page. There you go. Right there.
There's
And maybe you can make it a little bigger so everybody can read it.
Whoa, that's a little big.
I can't see that, Chris. I don't know if you've shared your screen yet or not.
Can you all see that where it says definitions, or do I need to change my sharing?
You need to change your sharing.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. There.
Okay, great. Everybody can see that, okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So what I have here are, it's basically the definition from your existing zoning regulations of an accessory dwelling. And then it refers to section 404 of your existing dwelling existing regulations, accessory dwelling unit. I've highlighted a few things in yellow in your definition. So you can see I highlighted efficiency or one-bedroom apartment. An accessory dwelling unit shall be defined as an efficiency or one-bedroom apartment located within or pertinent to an owner-occupied single-family dwelling that is clearly subordinate to a one-family dwelling, etc. I also highlighted 1,000 square feet. And then Chris, if you would scroll down. Basically I'll call it TAN language that starts except for floodplain, flood hazard area and fluvial erosion area is the statutory definition of what is allowed for an accessory dwelling unit. There I highlighted an accessory dwelling unit means a distinct unit that is clearly subordinate to a single family dwelling. And you can see down below, I highlighted 900 square feet versus 1,000 that you all allow. But I also immediately below that, I highlighted a bylaw that is nothing in subdivision 1E of this section shall be construed to prohibit a bylaws that's less restrictive of accessory dwelling units. So the statute is a floor. Basically, you can't be more restrictive, but you can be less restrictive. As an example, you allow a little bigger square footage area, 1,000 versus 900 that the statute permitted as a floor. On the other hand, your language above regarding or restricting accessory dwelling units to efficiencies or one bedrooms located within or pertinent to a owner occupied single family dwelling is a little bit more restrictive. So the statute is actually, and this is a recent change in the statute. Your zoning bylaw reflects the old statute. The basically the language in tan reflects the current statute, and it got less restrictive and took out the requirement for efficiency and a or a one bedroom. So one of the things that I would propose that you can do is take out basically your reference to inefficiency or one bedroom. That would basically reflect the intent of the statute. It would be a little less restrictive. The size of the maximum size of an accessory dwelling unit would not necessarily change, but it would still have to, and it would still have to be subordinate to the single family unit that also occupies the lot, but it could theoretically be a 2-bedroom unit. It would be a small 2-bedroom unit, but it could be. And I guess that would be the first question that I would pose to the board and open it up for discussion. How do you all feel about that proposed change?
I'd like to ask a background question. Do we know why our regs say that 1 bedroom?
That was the exact verbiage in the previous state statute.
Oh, so we just took it over from the
We literally
previous,
kind of-
more restrictive statute.
Yeah, so the statutes we're looking at now, will they remove that, or we're just past last year?
Okay.
And they removed it by. virtue
Hello?
of not-
It needs to be subordinate to, so they left in the unit sizes, the greater of, and theirs is 900, or 30% of the single family residence. So they left those restrictions in, but they removed how many bedrooms, tying it to bedrooms.
I apologize for butting in before giving other people opportunity for discussions. Anybody have any questions or comments about?
I have a comment.
Sure. Go ahead.
I just want to say that my immediate feeling about this is that we're too liberal with the sizes of these buildings. I lean more toward the 1 bedroom, not so large, because if you imagine the busyness and the traffic, the parking next to these houses are already in many areas quite close. And if you're going to add a family, another family, you're talking about 2 bedrooms, you might have 4 people in that, you might have 2 or 3 cars in that place. The idea of these, I thought originally, was for a single person, perhaps a couple, but certainly not more, seems to me, like the grandma idea or the mother-in-law. And like 900 feet is plenty, it seems to me, for that. And that's my first feeling about whether to enlarge this. And it was only kind of, well, I forget your name, but you were talking about how most of the houses are 1 or 2 people. And that seems like a smaller building would be suitable for the 1 or 2 persons. And we don't need even 1,000 feet. Like my house is about 1,000 feet. And I've lived in 1,000-foot houses and had 2 children. And, it's doable, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, I can assure you, and I'm sure you might agree. And if you're living in the heart of Bristol Village, and all of a sudden everybody surrounding you has another little accessory dwelling unit with 4 people in it, it's going to be awfully tight. It already is relatively tight. And I think that might change the character of the neighborhood. Let's just put it bluntly. And I could go on, but that's enough for me now. Thanks.
Anybody else?
So what I took away from that is that there is, per the legislation, no way to limit the number of bedrooms in this. As someone that has lived in a 900 square foot house with basically 3 bedrooms in it, it's possible. It's not that far out of the realm to have that many people in such a thing. It doesn't seem like an accessory dwelling unit when you're able to do that, as opposed to another whole dwelling unit. It's not an accessory at that point, it seems like. So, but if the legislation doesn't allow for any restrictions to that, our hands are kind of tied to that, aren't they?
No, the legislation allows us to restrict it, right? No.
No,
To 2 bedrooms?
The legislation doesn't refer to bedrooms. They make
that's
no
right,
mention of how many bedrooms.
right. The legislation
How-
took
how
out
would
the
one
mentions
interpret
for that. I would say if you're putting a restriction on bedrooms, that would be more restrictive, and the title of this statute is actually, it's 24 VSA 4412, and it's things towns can't do, for lack of a better term. I'm paraphrasing, but
It's the prohibitions of zoning bylaws or such.
so
Would
go ahead.
sorry, Adam, I was just going to ask if the term subordinate would mean that you were able to restrict it to less bedrooms than the main dwelling?
That's an excellent question, and I cannot necessarily tell you the answer to that. Whether should it have less bedrooms than the single family dwelling does to be clearly subordinate? Probably, I'd say yes. But I can't necessarily tell you that, I could say it has the same number of bedrooms, but it's only 900 square feet or 1,000 square feet, and the single family home is 2,000 square feet or 2,500 or 3,000. So therefore it's clearly subordinate. I do not know how a court might decide that, and I don't think any of us do. I don't think it's been decided yet. It's a relatively new change in the law.
Do we, let's see.
So where does our current law fit then? Our current reg, which restricts it to 1 bedroom.
That's this exact same statute a year ago. In the last legislative session to address the housing crunch. Our legislators removed that restriction intentionally, as they view this as a solution to the housing shortage in Vermont. It's creating all these ADUs instead of creating more housing. So
The short of it is, our current regulation couldn't contest it.
Yes, I would say that it could.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't catch that comment.
Well, my comment was, in a nutshell, our current regulation, because it's inconsistent with state statute, could be contested. If somebody wanted to do something more than 1 bedroom.
Wouldn't they have a path open to them just by applying for I don't know. An ADU is an ADU and a house is a house. It just seems like there should be some sort of limit on it. Are Adam, have you said that our current language saying 1,000 square feet and or efficiency, 1 bedroom or efficiency, like that, we can't keep that language?
I'm suggesting that you probably should remove the efficiency or 1 bedroom prohibition in your current zoning regulations to align with the statute. The 1,000 square feet that you allow is actually more generous than statute requires. So you can do it if you choose to. You have to do at least 900, but you don't have to do 1,000.
I think I'd like to see if there's no prohibition against designating, say 1 bedroom or studio. I think is a more modern uses of the term than efficiency, but whatever. I don't see a compelling reason to change that.
Well, we're trying to find ways to liberalize the housing stock here and get more housing, and we had this example, I mean, Kevin brought this up, and I actually know the person who wanted to build an ADU over his garage, 2 bedrooms for his in-laws. And he can't do it because it's 2 bedrooms. So there goes, one potential housing unit. If a couple with a child, they're not going to want to move into a 1-bedroom apartment, I don't think. Seems unlikely. Even a couple might want 2 bedrooms so they can have a spare bedroom for people to come to visit. It doesn't seem, it's not, the size, the 1,000 square feet limits it already.
Well,
If you make, and that you can make it into as many bedrooms, well, you can't make 5 bedrooms in 1,000 square feet. I understand concerns about changing the nature of the village, but anything we do is going to change the nature somehow. That's the point I was trying to make before, but what's the benefits versus the cost? And would there be a real cost what would be the benefit of removing that? Would allow more people young families to come in. What would be the cost? Well, there could be a little bit more traffic, but changing it to 2 bedrooms, that means a couple with a child. I don't think it changes the number of cars somehow. We're not talking about a 4 or 5 bedroom apartment. It's not feasible.
Right now, so this is a soapbox I get on all the time. If I'm out of line on my speaking on this, I apologize, but an accessory dwelling unit was not designed to be an apartment, not a rental unit to rent to somebody else. The original intent of the ADU was to create, we called them in-law apartments up to that point for a reason. They were so you could add a living space to your home, typically in your home. It was so that you could have family move in, or the existing resident could age in place and their family could move into the larger home to take care of them, or vice versa. What we're looking at in the market now is people are using the ADUs as sources of revenue only, because they're buying houses they can't afford, and the only way they can make their mortgage payment is to rent more space. So they're using the ADU as an end around to what I feel is not the answer to the housing crisis. We've taken something that's actually a great tool to allow our families and our communities to grow, and we've turned it into a retail monster. And that's the last I'll speak on this.
so Fred, go ahead.
I
just have a question.
Fred's called on Fred. I'll do you next, Melissa.
Okay.
I wanted to get a definition from you, Adam, of pertinent. This accessory dwelling, it's mentioned in the statute, and we have it here, that the accessory dwelling is located within or appurtenant to an owner occupied 1 family. What does appurtenant mean?
Close to. It doesn't necessarily need to be attached. It needs to be related to it. So
Related to it.
yeah, and I can't tell you whether it means, I can tell you it doesn't need to be attached. It could be in above a garage, near the single family unit.
But it somehow has to relate
Yes,
to the single family unit.
yes, and if someone
And
had
above a
20
garage, you could perhaps assume that, because
Yes.
the garage relates to the single family unit.
Yes. Yes. And I can't tell you how far people can push appurtenant.
Okay, I can't either. Okay. Another question I had, and maybe it gets to the root of this. I'm a relatively new member, but I'm not a new member when it comes to housing and affordable housing. I've been active in that arena for quite some time. And I'm wondering, in Bristol, what do we hear from people in the village? Chris makes a good point in his observation as a zoning administrator and what we've seen. But what is our goal? What is suitable? When I walk around the village, when people visit us, or others that come in from outside of the village, walk around the village, they think it's great. They think it's beautiful. And the outline, the streets and everything else. And tampering with that a lot. I don't know whether that'd be a solution versus trying to look for, my goal would be more larger units on that periphery of the village, as you call it, expansion, where you can make a difference. Like, is it Livingston's or is it, who the hell built the one on the beginning of Hardscrabble?
Oh, Tyco, you mean?
Yeah, Lakewood. Yeah.
Yep, that was Livingston.
Yeah, those types of units, like the ones we have down on Lover's Lane, where you can have an impact, because you're building 12, 15, whatever it is, units, something close to town.
I mean, the
buses
20 there,
even
the 20 there
go by-
going in next to the fire station.
Yeah, yeah, though, that to me is where you make an impact. Putzing around with a quarter, which is what my village lot is, for 0.3 acres, and messing around with that too much, I don't know whether that's good. The other thought I had is, we don't have a municipal system here like we do in Virgins and Middlebury and Burlington and so many other communities. I don't know whether regional planning has ever done a study of how many additional septic systems, because you would need to add an additional septic system with a pertinent above a garage thing, probably, maybe not if you added a 500 square feet to a home and your mother-in-law lives there. But how far can we go with that? Especially on small lots. And what else does that restrict in terms of that property's use long term? Those are some of the things that go through my head. Whether it's 900 or 1,000, I don't know whether, I don't know. Those are the questions I have, is what are the limits? What's appropriate?
All good questions. You all are gonna answer those. I can't give you,
What about the septic? That's more of a technical thing.
yep.
The
So-
septic is typically based on number of bedrooms. When you go for a septic permit, they don't ask about bathrooms, they ask about bedrooms, because that tells them how many people are gonna live there.
How
And
much
therefore the burden.
Oh, you run the dishwasher, etc.
Correct. So, you're right, you don't have a municipal system. You do have a municipal water system, which helps with setbacks and things of that nature. And you've got very good soils for septic systems in Bristol. So you do have some additional capacity. Each lot owner would need to weigh the costs and benefits of whether they want to put in a septic system or some other structure, because there are setback requirements for those. I can tell you, let's see. Where was I going? You're right about, you may not need it inside the house, but you would need it. And I was saying, if you look at basically both your regulation and the statute, one of the things that they say is you need wastewater capacity if you're going to add one of these units. So that's going to be a natural limiting factor, and something that any individual who's considering this needs to take into account when they're making their decision. But it's going to be a little different for each person. On a quarter acre, you may not want to devote that land to a wastewater system. Someone with a half acre might. If you look over at the commons, the village commons project that went in basically across the street, the septic area there is in the center green. Basically, so they're able to use it as common space and take care of the wastewater. So there are solutions if you want to do it.
Melissa,
Yes, I was just wondering, maybe I missed this in a previous one, but how many ADUs are actually in Bristol? Do we have a number?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't have it in front of me.
Because I can't imagine people in the village, in the tight area of the village, building garages so they can put an ADU in there. I just don't, I don't know. I mean, is that something?
It happens. People aren't necessarily building garage. They are building some. I've got one on Garfield Street, if you want to go see one.
Yeah.
And the other issue is that a lot of people are looking at converting existing structures. And to do that, quite often, it's expanding those existing garages that they have. I would say I get close to one call a week on these. Somebody inquiring. 70% of the people bail on it when they realize they can only
Yeah.
do one.
Yeah,
But I would say at least once a week, somebody's inquiring about this.
Chris, do you have a percentage roughly of how many of those are for rental versus home expansion or family expansion?
The closest I can tell you is it's predominantly. In the last 3 years, the primary conversation is we're looking at trying to add some more income so that we can afford the house. Not that we're trying to stay with mom.
If that's the case, I feel fairly clear about the desirability of limiting it to 1-bedroom or studio spaces. I am not at all averse to people renting their garage apartment or whatever. I think it's a great thing, in fact. But I think it's important then to consider the neighbors and adjoining landowners and their already established lifestyles. And I think having one bedroom or studio ADUs is great and will fill a need, and won't meet every housing need that there is, but it definitely will fill a niche. And seems like protecting the neighbors is, should be equal to that as well.
Okay, so,
is it possible, would it be a possibility if to allow 2 bedrooms, but only 1 family? So you can't rent to 2 individuals, so you're talking, there's not 2 more, an extra car or whatever, just so people can, if they choose to have a child or if they have a small child, they might want to rent something like that for a few years until they can, get a house. Would that be a possibility?
It's really hard to regulate whose families these days and who get to live together these days. It's not, I would tell you, it's not somewhere you want to go, and I would not want to be trying to enforce it.
Rob, you have your hand up?
Yeah, question for Adam. Obviously, there's some hesitation about changing the language. If we were to leave the language, even though the legislation says that it can't be restricted, what does that open us up to, or the town up to, as we move forward with this? Is it litigation? Is it just it doesn't get followed and it can't be enforced, so it's pointless anyway, and we just hope to scare things off? What's the real outcome?
It's potentially litigation. So the statute that I quoted from and that the language comes from is 24 VSA 4412, and it's entitled Required Provisions and Prohibited Effects. And basically it says, notwithstanding any existing bylaw, the following land development provisions shall apply in every municipality. Shall apply in every municipality. I get down to number E, and that's the one that I quoted you in the language that was just up on the board. It starts with except for flood hazards. And basically, it took out, the legislature chose to take out the efficiency and 1-bedroom units that Bristol copied from the previous legislation and still has in. The legislature deleted it. I'm suggesting that you probably need to delete it to follow the law. But nobody's going to buy into a lawsuit, or chances are people aren't going to buy into a lawsuit either. It's just not a good use of their funds and time. So,
Adam, what was the first sentence that you read at the top of that statute? Starts with
Notwithstanding any bylaws.
notwithstanding any existing bylaws, the following land development provisions shall apply in every municipality. And then I would go down to subsection E, except for flood hazard and fluvial erosion area bylaws adopted pursuant to 4424 of this title. No bylaw shall have the effect of excluding as a permitted use one accessory dwelling unit that is located within or pertinent to a single-family dwelling on an owner-occupied lot.
That seems to leave plenty of room for us to decide what an ADU is in our bylaws.
So let's have, Shannon, Shannon, do you have any questions or comments? We got a couple people that haven't weighed in here yet.
No, I guess the only thing I would weigh in is that when we talk about the ADUs and people wanting to build them for more money, I guess I'm feeling like that for our younger family, based on the price of housing. And as quickly as it goes right now, that some of those people, younger families just can't afford housing in Bristol. And, you know, we have a very aging an aging problem in this town. We're not getting any younger. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So that's just my thought. I mean, that I understand why people want an ADU to make money. It's because it's expensive to take care of, maintain, pay property taxes, heat, electric, all those things. And so I guess I'm not against people having that two bedroom because they want to rent it to a family instead of just put a relative in there.
Okay, and Bill?
Kevin, I believe we should be very careful about making changes that would increase the density of what we normally think of as the village. I think people make investments as they buy a home and they live in a neighborhood as to what their expectations are. And we have some flexibility. Certainly, I think we should comply with the state law, even though it might seem a little more in the nature of a mandate than we might like. I kind of like the idea of that Fred mentioned of maybe looking at some higher density construction or allowed use in the areas outside of the village core or on the edge of it. I've forgotten right now just where those boundaries are. And before I end up, could I ask Adam to review those statistics again about a number of single and two-person households we have in Bristol, and is it broken? It's probably not broken down by the village, but in the town.
You're right, it's just broken down by the town. So I would tell you, let's see, household size.
Yeah.
So your average household size in Bristol in 2010 was 2.45 people per house. And 2020, and from the census, it's dropped to 2.42. It's expected to drop further by 2025 to 2.41. 62% of households in Bristol are 1 to 2 people. Of renter households, 72% have 1 to 2 people. 96% have less than 3 people. Three or less people. 96% have 3 or less people.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, that's good, Adam. So it seems to me like the overall average household size is not that much different than the national, but I heard a statistic a few weeks ago that in Vermont, it might have been 25%, it might have even been 40% of the households just have one person in. Do you have any data like that for Bristol?
So I only brought my summary sheet tonight.
Okay.
The answer is yes, I'm sure we do, and we went over Bristol demographics a couple of meetings ago. But the answer is, if I look at, rental households, 72% have 1 to 2 people. So if you say, if 72 have 1 or 2, then it makes sense that half of that roughly is one and half of that is two, or somewhere in the neighborhood that you mentioned. So that's for rental housing. 62% of households in Bristol are 1 to 2 people. So rental is a little higher, but of overall households, 62% are 1 to 2 people. So I think the statistics that you just mentioned are in the right ballpark. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make two quick comments that are basically factual comments. First, the grant is restricted to the village planning area. We actually tried to expand it originally when we made our application, and the state slapped it down and said, no, you can only deal with the village planning area. So what goes on outside it, we can't deal with under this grant.
But I think the area that's being discussed on Plank Road is within the.
Is within, yeah, sure, but yeah. The other part is about density. Our goal is to increase the amount and the flexibility of housing in the village planning area. By definition, that means it's going to be more dense. That's the purpose of this, is to make it more dense. The question is, how do you want to make it more dense? If you don't want to increase the amount of housing, then there's no point to the process.
So if I may, just building on that, I'm giving you a whole, I guess, menu of different ways, different changes that you can make to basically allow more housing to be developed in Bristol. And I would say allow more housing of the type that you want and need should be your goal. You don't have to take all of them, but if you want to accomplish the goal of the grant, you need to take some of them. And if you all want to direct me to a different course and say, you know, we should talk about this specifically, we can try those first.
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, you were talking about the scope of the grant. Does that mean the planning commission can't work on anything else at the same time as what we're working on with that falls within the grant?
Well, I'll answer that.
Okay.
So the dicey part is we retain Adam on a specific scope, which is to utilize our exploration of the bylaw modernization grant and all the requirements that come along with it. As we digress from that, we're off that that project, if you will. And you know, if we digress, we need to talk about that project and determine what the impact is to having this grant completed, as well as the cost to do those additional activities, which you know, maybe we want to choose to do. But Adam's primary focus right now is the contract that he has to affect what we signed up for the planning grant. That help?
I think so. But is that something like if someone does have an idea or have something that falls outside the scope, is that we just keep a record of that and we keep track of that and we come back to it at some point?
I would recommend going that route with that.
Yeah.
And the important thing with that aspect is if we as a commission believe that those side issues will require change in zoning, that they need to be integrated at the point that it's voted on in 2024, as opposed to follow next year, 2025, with another revision to the bylaws. So it's
Right.
important to keep track of that stuff, but we need to be mindful of what we have for our work before us that's we have officially contracted Adam for.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I guess I got one question about, so if we, there's language here. This is a by right use essentially,
Yes.
and
must be.
it requires a permit from the zoning administrator still, right?
Right.
So it's the purview of the zoning administrator to consider if this thing is subordinate, or what was the term? Yeah, subordinate. So it's up to the zoning administrator to determine that it's clearly subordinate and that it has the right wastewater and state requirements and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And then at that point, they issue a permit or deny the request.
That's correct. So Chris is gonna follow whatever not statutory, whatever bylaw language that you all create. So he will judge the project by the language that you adopt.
And then if he approves it, then they go off very happy with their permit. If he says no, this is not subordinate, this is something that's impactful to the current house or setting. Does that go to the BZA for
So,
appeal?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick rundown how this works. So I issue a permit. I get an application from an applicant. If I issue the permit, they then will post the poster in their window, the infamous P poster. There's a 15-day appeal period. During that 15-day appeal period, if an appeal occurs, it goes to the DRB. That's if somebody appeals it. The same process would go on if the applicant was denied. They can appeal my denial to the DRB within a very set window of time. Then, however, the DRB then would have a hearing. The applicant, if they do not get the outcome they want there, they do have the ability then to take it to e-court. And then wherever it goes from there, it's in the judicial system. Supreme, I believe, is the next step. So there are steps that people can take to go through to do that, which if it ever did run that way, may force the bylaws to be changed. If we didn't change them, but
So, okay, so we've had a fair amount of discussion on this one. Do we have any sense of what we want to change here so we can give Adam some direction and move on to the next topic? I mean, to me, we've got an issue here. Do we remain non-compliant or do we become compliant with the state statute? I think it's-
Excuse me? I'm just going back to when Adam quoted the new legislation, it began with the words, notwithstanding existing bylaws. Do we not have an existing bylaw on our books? Yes?
I don't think that's exactly what I said.
Well, read it. It's what I'm pretty sure. First words.
I've got it right here. Notwithstanding any existing bylaw, the following land development provisions shall apply.
Notwithstanding any existing bylaw. Doesn't that mean if there is an existing bylaw that can stand as it is, like grandfathered in, so to speak?
It means the
Or not?
opposite. Well, it means the opposite.
It means
You
the
have a
opposite,
bylaw,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. This is what will apply.
Or if you don't have a bylaw, this is what will apply. If you haven't addressed the issue, this is what will apply.
Notwithstanding any existing bylaw, following land development provisions shall apply. So if you have a bylaw which doesn't meet them, doesn't matter. This is the provision that shall apply.
State statute overrules town bylaws, and I would agree with what Jeff just said.
I don't
Although,
know how we can not change it. If we want to, we want to be within the law of the state, I would think.
sometimes laws are selectively applied, as we all know, but I think it would have been better if the state had written this particular mandate by putting the word notwithstanding at the end of the phrase existing bylaws. That's the way quite often this particular idea is expressed. When they put it at the beginning of the sentence, it's perfectly natural for Slim or anybody else to interpret it in the way he did. But I think what it means is that it overrules us.
Yeah.
Do we have
I-
any other? Go ahead, John.
I, for one, would not like to see a lot of two-bedroom, quote unquote, ADUs. I'm all for ADUs. I'm for more density for sure. Generally speaking, throughout the town, including the village, but you know, an ADU is an ADU or it's an apartment, you know, it's a standalone apartment. I don't know, it can't be both really to me. So I just wouldn't want to open it up to anybody cramming as much, you know, as many bedrooms as they can into their ADU. So how do we protect against that?
I would be inclined to use the state's 900 square feet. It would somewhat limit, because of the area, what you could do. But then not mention that it's got to be a one bedroom. Because that seems to be the big hang up here that the state has. It's interesting, they don't say anything about how many bedrooms it can be. Does that mean we can interpret it that it's okay to have 4 bedrooms, Adam?
Well, it's got to be clearly subordinate to the main structure. So if the main structure has, it can't have more than the main structure, I would tell you. It probably.
It doesn't say that here, unless it says it somewhere else.
Well, clearly subordinate to the primary dwelling.
So just to put some perspective on size and whether 900 would stop it. A 24 by 36 home, which is what I grew up in a 2-bedroom house, is only 864 square feet. So we're talking accessory dwelling units bigger than some homes. So
Problem.
that's where I have some. Makes one of the ideas that came out, I heard somebody mention that you all may want to think about, is some sort of proportion to the size of the home. Whether it can be, it has to be less than the total number of bedrooms in the existing home, or it can be half the number of bedrooms in the existing home, so that it keeps it a proportional size to the home and doesn't put any hard, fast limitation. And it's sort of a middle ground between the two concepts.
You could define or try and define, the town of Bristol defines the concept of clearly subordinate as
50% of the
half of the existing bedrooms, or something like that. You could try it. It might be a way to address this. Fred suggested adopting the statute almost verbatim and taking your 1,000 down to 900. It's a small change. But taking out the bedrooms.
I like Chris's idea as well. About the putting it as to a proportion of what exists.
Well, the statute says it's 30% or 900 square feet, whatever is greater, which means you get at least 900 square feet. And I think they didn't want somebody with a 900 or 1,000 square foot home not to be able to put in an accessory apartment. Right? They didn't want only people with 3,000 square foot units to do it. So I think there was a kind of a balancing act on that.
And it must be a single family home.
Yes, I'm 90% sure of that.
That's in the statute.
That's
Yes.
right. So with the state definition, you're limited to 900 square feet unless the original home is more than 3,000 square feet. Which would be unusual in Bristol, I think.
Well, we say does not exceed the greater of.
The greater of, right, so you could have more than 900 square feet if your home is larger than 3,000 square feet.
If we kept the 30% in there.
But that's in the state statute.
That's in the statute.
That statute.
They said that too.
Yep.
I don't see it there. It's down in there. Oh, down here.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to just comply with the state statute. I don't, I mean, not like language like cramming in bedrooms. How many bedrooms can you put in a 900 square foot? You have to have, by the way, the housing code says you have to have a kitchen, you have to have a bathroom, you have to have a hallway.
Again, a 864 square foot raised ranch home is what I grew up in. And that was a 2-bedroom house and there was plenty of room. So, I mean, we aren't cramming bedrooms into 900 square feet to get 2 bedrooms. You're really not.
You could put 4 bedrooms in a 1,000 square foot unit. It would be small, but you could certainly do it.
So
Whether
let's-
you would want to, some people, it's the economics of doing it.
Now, let's recap here and see where we're going. So the question on the table is, I guess, is, do we just like, go with the state statute, or do we want to have some deviations that would loosen up the state statute? Essentially, is what the two options are, maybe, or there's another one. I'm concerned we're starting to go in circles here.
No.
My basic question is, how can we not have what the state requires in our bylaws? That's my basic question.
Personally, I think it's poor judgment to do that,
Do what?
not do at least what the state requires.
Yeah,
I personally like the idea of trying to more clearly define subordinate. I don't know if that makes it more restrictive in the state's eyes or a clear point of clarification. But if we do have to open it up, I do like the idea of defining that, as Chris suggested.
and it's not going to take effect immediately, right? It would be after we complete this whole process. Is that right?
Correct.
And the
And-
town votes on it.
Right. So nobody tomorrow is going to come in and say, hey, I want to put a 3-bedroom, ACU in my backyard or whatever, so I just think we should make the movement to comply with the state legislation.
So what I'm hearing is we are going to respect the state's statute, and we will add some definition to subordinate so that there is a rule, I guess you could say, as to what.
What constitutes
What-
clearly subordinate?
Yes.
I agree.
That makes sense.
That sounds good to me.
You too.
I'm on board.
Can you define some, can you draft us a definition of subordinate? Or do we?
If you promise not to take the whole next meeting, like arguing about it.
Can't promise that, or do you want us to?
And there was no argument.
Yes, Chris and I will work on, I'm gonna consult your zoning administrator, and Chris and I will work on a definition of clearly subordinate for ADUs. So we'll basically copy the state language. Are you keeping 1,000 square feet?
Honestly, 900,000, it
Doesn't matter.
I don't think it's in the
Semantics.
grand scheme of things, I don't think it matters. If you control if you keep it proportional to the living space of the home, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah,
But
and
That's-
by summarizing that we respect the state statute, I think that alludes to the 900.
Doesn't have to. You have the ability to do more if you choose to.
But I'm hearing people are thinking of that as a compromise, so.
That's fine with me.
So you're saying 900?
Anybody really hard objections to that? Going to 900?
Not for me, no.
How about 950?
That was a joke.
I'll meet you at 9.
Yeah, there we go. We're all set now.
I just find, I'm still struggling with the idea that somebody brought up earlier, which is, we don't want to encourage a spate of cramming in rental units and multi-bedroom rental units in smaller backyards. And I'm just not sure I'm understanding how we protect against that.
So are you suggesting that we go against the state statute?
No, I'm just asking how we protect against people cramming in lots of extra bedrooms in their backyards.
So there's a few ways you can do it, John. And I think Adam and I had some discussions on this earlier, and I think he's gonna head down this in a little while. Unfortunately, the ADU aspect is the state, but I do believe that you as a commission can create some safeguards against just that, is seeing too much overgrowth in the village and trying to promote it on our peripheries. So I believe that that's part of where we're heading in the future with the
It
density
is. We're
discussion.
gonna look at densities in all districts within the village plan, well, within 5 districts within the village planning area. So again, the districts that a couple of you have alluded to is your village residential district, which is the light blue on the outskirts of what you consider the current village. High density residential. So if you look at the light blue, that's one place you could consider changing density. If you look at you can consider changing density in all of them, but the light blue and the cross-hatched in particular, the village mix, are places with some additional room for additional density that could match the fabric of your village, that are relatively close to your existing village, if you chose to do that. And that will be a discussion that we're going to have hopefully soon.
See you next.
Yes. Okay. I think I will want to go to duplexes now, rather than multifamily, and I'm hoping we might get through duplexes a little bit in this meeting, because you currently allow duplexes as permitted uses in most of your districts. So and we've had this long discussion about accessory dwelling units. And one of the things Chris said to me when we were talking about this and preparing for this meeting was, people doing accessory dwelling units really want a duplex, but it's a workaround. So perhaps we make duplexes easier to develop. And Chris suggested to me that so duplex is on the next page. I didn't do a lot. Suggested that if we define duplexes as basically one structure, 2 units within one structure, it's got to have a shared wall. And then, since it's only one structure, you probably don't have to change a lot of setbacks or dimensional standards, but you would need, if you chose to change the density standards within whatever districts you wanted to allow more duplexes in. So you would have to work up some type of sliding scale, whereby if a single family unit needed 10,000 square feet, you could say duplexes, and only duplexes needed 8 or 5, depending on how aggressively you wanted to promote them. And with that one change, you could enhance the ability to bring duplexes into areas in Bristol that you felt it was appropriate.
Adam, with that sort of sliding scale, is the premise that say if it's 10,000 for a single, that 5,000 for a duplex, is that per unit within the duplex? Or is that per duplex?
No, that would be per unit within the duplex.
Okay,
And if you chose to, you could limit the number of duplexes on a lot. You know, if you thought somebody was just gonna try and put 2 units, take advantage of you, someone with a bigger lot was gonna take more advantage. So, and there aren't that many bigger lots specifically in your high density village. If that were, so you need to be thoughtful about it, but it's a potential solution for if you choose to go that way for at least your high density residential district.
So I'm a little confused. A duplex would be two units per building, right?
Correct.
We can only have one building per lot.
Nope, you can have as many buildings as you want. If you go through a PUD, you meet the density, you can put as many buildings as you want.
Okay. But a single lot. Traditional single lot in the village is one. No, I could have 2 houses on my lot.
If you had a half acre lot, so great example, we'll use one, I know it's a half acre, it used to be my grandma Junit's lot on Liberty Street, that's a half acre lot. If the owner of that wanted to go through the PUD process and build a second home on that parcel, they could do that without having to subdivide. That's the way the PUD works.
But if you don't do a PUD, then your premise is generally
Yes.
correct. Land unit development, excuse me.
You know, we use a lot of acronyms and we do that. Fred, do what you just did, ask us to stop.
So I guess anybody have any opening comments? About duplexes.
I'm not clear on what we're looking at changing the definition of duplex, is that right?
No, you'd be looking at, well, yes, you'd make a small change to the definition of a duplex. You'd make sure that it was one building with a shared wall with 2 units. So it's
We actually have to create a new definition.
There is no definition.
We haven't, let's pull up what we have.
dwelling 2 family, a building or portion thereof designed exclusively for occupancy by 2 families or households living independently of each other as individual dwelling units, also known as a duplex.
Oh, also known as a duplex.
Yep. So, and it's a building, and it is a single building or a portion thereof, so you might not need to change anything within your current definition. What you'd be looking at changing, if you chose to do so, would be to increase the density, decrease the density for a duplex. So make, if in the example I gave you, if a single family unit required 10,000 square feet, a duplex could be lowered, and all of your current zoning regulations, your density is tied to units. So it's tied to living units. So Chris is pulling up an example. Nope, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So what zone?
This
are we in?
is HDR.
This is your HDR district. So basically, this is the core of what I would call, it's what all of you think about the residential section of your village. You currently allow 4 dwelling units per acre, so roughly 11,000 square feet. But so someone could theoretically build 2 duplexes on that acre lot if they had a full acre. Most of the lots within your village area, high density residential area, are probably somewhere between a third and a quarter of an acre already. So they could, if let's say they're a quarter of an acre, they could have 1 unit. They can have 1 single family unit. What we're suggesting, if you would like to promote more duplexes being developed would be to have 4 dwelling units per acre for single-family homes, but have basically 8 dwelling units per acre for duplexes. So anyone could build a duplex on the same lot that they could currently build a single-family home on. Did that make sense to all of you? Did I explain that okay?
Maybe you could repeat it. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. So what if you want to promote the development of duplexes, one of the ways that you could do it would be to decrease the density requirements on a lot. So let's say someone has a 1/4 acre lot in your existing village area in your HDR district. Right now, they can build basically one house. They can build a single family home. They can build a 1 dwelling unit.
If they want to build a duplex, they need a half an acre.
If they want to build a duplex, they would need a half an acre. That's correct. So if you chose to, you could change the standard so that they could build a duplex on a 1/4 acre if they chose to.
Or if I could, you could also put it somewhere in between. You could say you could build a duplex as long as you have 1/3 of an acre or 15,000 square feet, right?
Yes.
Which would reduce the density requirement, but not make it identical to a single family home.
Correct.
That's an option.
Correct.
And what this would allow for, and where I get a lot of inquiries on, is converting single family homes into duplexes. Without doing an ADU, so they're able to take an existing footprint at home and put a second apartment in it. And they don't have to, they aren't trying to go the ADU route. And again, if we're gonna add more units, let's just do it, let's call it a spade and.
They could take a 4-bedroom home and convert it into 2 2-bedroom units, which is something they couldn't have done under the ADU previously, prior to your decision earlier tonight.
What do you think, Fred?
I mean, there are existing duplexes on 1/3 and 1/4 acre lots in the village now, pre-zoning, I'm sure all of them. And I don't think it's a bad concept. When you're taking existing units and you're making modifications, there probably need to be some guidance for septic, for example. You know, because maybe there's 2 bedrooms in this 1,400 square foot ranch, and now it's going to be 7 and 7, but there's going to be 4 bedroom units. And so as long as I guess we make sure that the various hoops that would make the place still good and safe and healthy would be followed.
That's required anyway, right? They have to get a wastewater.
Well, do
Yes.
they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
For that, they would have to, if they're adding.
But if it's
they have
not,
to get a
oh,
wastewater
you
permit.
do regardless.
Yes.
Okay.
Any change of use of a structure requires at least a wastewater review.
Any comments, Rob?
I'm just trying to process how to move forward because I think we need to ask the question, do we have the desire to increase the use of duplexes? And if so, is it blanket statement or is it just specific zones? It's a big ball of wax. It's been hotly contested and it just gets messy the more we try to need it. So.
Kevin, what is your time frame tonight?
Yeah. Yeah. We'll probably go a little bit more on this and call it tonight.
That's going to be 45 million for the rest of your business.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
Oh,
So we're discussing how much longer we want to do this, and we're suggesting that we get our feet wet on this and then do our miscellaneous bids for another 10 minutes or so, and then have some quick discussion afterwards, and then we're out of here.
Well, I guess that, can I make a comment? That
Sure.
The first question is, are we interested, and it doesn't mean we have to do it, are we interested in loosening the requirements for duplexes? If we're not, then that's the end of the discussion. If we are interested, to what degree do we want to loosen them? Do you want to loosen them, make it the same as a single unit, or do you want to make it somewhere in between? So I would go to the first question first. Are you interested in encouraging more duplexes by decreasing the density requirement? And if the answer is no, then that's the end of that discussion. If it's yes, then we can figure out, maybe the next time we can think about where the number should be.
I think that's a great suggestion.
And I think it's worth discussing, my opinion, worth discussing, because it's one of the options.
So what, you've thrown the question out, are you in favor of?
I'm in favor of looking into it, because I think it's one of the ways to make housing more affordable and flexible in the village planning area.
Are we also going to talk about, I always call them apartment buildings, where there are 3 or more units, that are part of this as well?
Yes.
That's a separate discussion. It's not part of the duplex question.
Well, that's true, but I think I would love to, at the end, have the opportunity to think about all of them. Yeah, how much have we done? What are we talking about doing here in total? That might help put some of these things, like your question, in perspective.
Yes, it's one of the tools that we plan to use and look at, and you'll have the ability to go back at the end and say, okay, here are the changes that we chose to make. Are they big enough, or do we need to do something else, or did we do too much, and should we pull 1 back or 2 back or whatever number back?
This is the one additional household at a time as we work through these different options. So
Yeah.
I think that it does make sense to look at trying to better utilize duplexes and other things as we talk about infilling and expanding, especially in the areas of village residential, village mixed, around the periphery. I think it gets more delicate when you start talking about HDR in downtown and unintended consequences with increasing the density of the households that much.
Melissa, what do you think? Should we?
I'm having trouble thinking. I'm sorry. I'm so exhausted at this season. I'm just trying to think. I just had a general question in whether it's duplexes or ADU or whatever it is within the village. Is there any? I know you say you have to account for wastewater, but what about parking? Is there something that requires, like, if you have a duplex or you divide your home and make it a duplex, that you have parking provided? Or is that?
Yes, you do have a parking regulation. I believe it's at least 1 spot per unit. I can check that. I'm doing that off the top of my head. So it's not the limiting factor, but it's something that we're going to look at.
And it's something that could be added or changed or modified.
Yep, it's on our list to look at.
So are duplexes worth exploring from your point of view?
I think so. I'm just personally not a fan of duplexes, but that's neither here nor there. But I think it would be worth it, because I'm sure there are people that would like to be able to divide their home and create a duplex without even building additional. Someone said, I can't remember who said that.
Kristen,
John, what do you think? Should we pursue it? Any initial comments?
I'm game for looking into duplexes. Yes, absolutely. I like the idea of, maybe it's not one duplex on the lot that's the same size for the single family, but maybe it's like a third of an acre or something like that. But yeah, I think duplexes are a good tool for increasing density, and definitely supportive of looking into them and exploring what we can do. Thanks.
What do you think, Slim?
You're on mute. Okay. You're still muted, Slim. Nope, you're still muted. There you
I'm
go.
getting there now. I'm getting there.
You got it, man.
Thank you for your patience. I can certainly be interested in talking about them, and I think they're more appropriate to some areas of the village, of the, whatever we're calling it, the village land use planning area, and less likely to be as appropriate in the more dense central village, though. But definitely worth looking at. I think parking is a real issue because people have cars, and sometimes they have two. And all of a sudden you have 2 bedrooms in a place and you're gonna have 4 cars. And that could be for an ADU as well. So I'm just saying, I think it's an issue that needs to be thought about really hard in the character of our neighborhood and for the appropriateness for the density of the village and just, the quality of life, whatever. Anyway, I think that.
Okay, and, Bill. Any thoughts, and is it worth pursuing?
Seems to me that every time that a group meets to make a plan for a community or any organization, we each of us bring our individual perspectives and experiences, and it ends up being a package in which everybody compromises somewhat. So I'm happy to include duplexes as one element of a general compromise, a general agreement. Let me use that word. But I still look to other ways to provide more affordable housing for people who want to live in Bristol as a preference, but we shouldn't rule anything off the table, at least in the beginning. But by the same token, I don't want us to assume that, as we have in the past sometimes, that if we say, okay, shall we move to the next point, that we assume that that's the way it's going to be. It's part of the picture.
Okay, and Shannon.
Yeah, I absolutely, sorry. I don't know if you can hear me now. Yeah, I definitely think we need to look at duplexes and Melissa's kind of point there. I see some of these houses, some of the bigger houses that people would probably like to split up into 2 that wouldn't change the character so much of the village by updating some of those houses interior wise. To make those duplexes. So I think it needs to be definitely considered. And obviously new construction as we move out from the main center of the village, it's definitely it's something needs to be looked at and considered, absolutely.
Any closing thoughts or comments as we close and send Adam off?
I have one for Kevin. And it's this, in light of this discussion.
I hear you. You're frozen, I think.
Holly Hall is frozen.
I'm not frozen.
Yeah, all right, it's not just
Eating an apple.
We will be on Saturday.
There you go.
They'll catch up eventually, I guess. There we go. There you
You're back.
are.
No,
Uh-oh.
I'm
Okay, I
anxious.
move to adjourn. Oh,
It's the host now. I hope Adam starts over.
Sorry about that. My machine dropped. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Blue screen. Yeah,
So sorry about that. I was saying, I think I'm gonna pivot next meeting. And basically focus in on one district. It'll be the HDR district. And we're gonna look at all the options within that district. And then you all can make some decisions.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I hope it'll move things along a little quicker. So,
And you were
thank
going,
you.
were you gonna get the number of ADUs in the village?
I will see what I will see what I can
Oh,
find.
we can do it? Okay.
okay, thank you, Adam.
Great, thank
And
you
the
all.
next meeting will be the third Tuesday in January, whatever that is. That would be,
17.
Okay, I will see you all at 7 o'clock on the 17th of January.
I will
Great.
not be.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you all.
thanks.
We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
When are you leaving? If you're not gonna be here.
That week. I'm just gone that week on vacation.
Before that.
Yeah.
Great, thanks again.
We'll touch base after the first of the year. It's a good holidays.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's more Luther King. The old space.
Yeah, we're going down to New Orleans for a week.
So the next item of business is, I'll make it short. Well, Adam,
Yes,
so one of the things, I received correspondence from somebody that is looking to put in a CCR grant
is
for,
it Tasha Bell?
yeah, Tasha Ball, yeah.
Tasha Ball.
Now, that's regional. Or is
So she needs a letter of support from me
Okay.
and I responded to her.
Okay,
So, assuming the town of Bristol is okay with it, I'm planning on supporting her application. It's
So,
childcare.
Yeah, it's childcare. It was before the select board yesterday, I think, and they
Okay,
are going to write a letter of support as well.
okay, then I will write a letter of support also. Perfect.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
thank you for connecting me with her.
Yeah, I was approached and like, wait a minute, we're in regional.
No, right, that's right.
So, okay, so that takes care of it. So the miscellaneous correspondence for the month is there was a request for proposals that went out for water quality on Otter Creek, Lewis Creek, and Little Otter, which doesn't really apply to us, but there's some information there for you. Andrew LeBeau, who was part of regional planning, approached me about a Middlebury College intern to work on some data development. I had him circle back with Adam. There was a feeling from Adam that there was not going to be value added there. It would not be field work, or it would not be on site work. It would be mostly from their place. So it was determined it wasn't a good fit. I just talked to Adam. We did get a request for a preschool project, Willow Well, Wren's Nest at Willow Well, I think it is. And they're going through a grant process for expanding that program. I got a request from the town clerk for our annual report for the town report. It's due 12/28. I have not started yet. I will draft it. Probably after the holidays or after Christmas. I'll send it out to you all, and if you have any comments or want to correct my English or whatever else, let me know and we'll get it turned around for her. And the diversity, equity, inclusion training that Porter Knight has approached us about, she's unavailable in January. So we'll do that in February. So that is all the correspondence from through the month from last meeting. Is there any questions or John?
Yeah, thanks. Just, I wasn't able to open the document, regarding the water studies, the watershed studies, Lewis Creek and a couple others.
Okay.
I wasn't able to read that. Is Bristol Pond is at the headwaters of, it's part of the Lewis Creek watershed, I believe. And I just wondered if there's anything for us in that. Bristol Pond had its first incidence of blue-green algae in the summer of 2021. First recorded at least. And I'm just wondering if I'd love to see that document and check it out.
Let me look. I only looked at it briefly because I didn't consider it was within our realm, but it was nonetheless sent to us for advisement. Let me look at it and see what I have, and I'll try to send you something that's workable for you.
Great. And just as an aside, just as a reminder, I couldn't open a couple of documents in the email this time. And I wondered if documents could be sent as PDFs instead of pages docs.
Did you try to open them up?
They're Word docs. So if you're trying to open them up on an Apple product, sometimes they get a little screwy.
Yeah, they do. So
Okay.
just wondering if those kinds of things could be saved as PDFs so they retain formatting and that sort of thing.
I'll do that in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? Okay. There's no new business. Is there any public comment? If there is none, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Under your meetings.
Oh, sorry. I just, thank you. So I was jumping around administrative matters. So actually I went to D. Number A is approval of the minutes from 11:15. Approval is informal, but we typically do it. So if anybody,
I know.
I like where your head was at though, Kevin.
yeah. Okay.
I did too, but I was like, we just got to get them done real quick.
I have a couple of minor things.
Okay.
One is, let's see, under continuing business 3A, small I, where it says Bristol Village area, second line down, I think it's Bristol Village playing area, I think it should say. And then the next paragraph down, II definitions and regulations, multifamily housing, second paragraph. Sorry, third line down, it says, but the same two-step, is that meant, do you mean like TWO step, I think? Two-step process.
Which line number is that, John?
It's 1, 2,
50.
third line.
50?
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't see the line numbers here.
Ah, okay.
It's a Word doc.
Let me share it.
There you
Okay,
go.
let me.
Yeah, sorry, I would refer to line number otherwise. That's
Okay.
it, those are minor.
Perfect.
So Peggy, did you capture those two changes?
I did.
Thank
Great.
you.
With those two changes, is there any other discussion, comments? Entertain a motion to approve then,
I would
as
say,
amended. Second,
Who made the motion?
John.
John,
Thank you.
and Rob seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
aye.
All right.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? One abstention. Fred wasn't here. Okay, and then the next, that takes care of that one. The next one is the zoning administrator's report.
No update.
No report, and after that is the ARPA funding committee update. It should be Rob.
So we have a meeting January 2nd and hope to get a list together to send out for a public survey to then review in February and get together the final list to present to the select board in March.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So now, we'll go back to our public has left, so we didn't have to revisit that. So entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Motion to adjourn.